Hallöchen, willkommen zurück zu The Stanley Parable 2. Ach du, jetzt fange ich auch schon an. Das Stanley Parable 3 Deluxe. Ey, das Spiel macht den echt fertig. Wobei ist er eigentlich der zweite Teil, was ich jetzt spiele. So, gucken wir mal. Mal gucken, wie lange das
All
Spiel
of
jetzt
his
noch geht.
co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Bin mal echt mal gespannt, wie lange das Ganze noch gehen soll hier. Oh, das ist jetzt, glaube ich, anders. Das war vorher noch nicht so.
When Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Okay, warte mal, wenn ich jetzt... Sehe ich jetzt links oder rechts? Weil links da war, habe ich eigentlich immer rechts lang mal wieder.
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it. The lounge was sublime, a work
Aber
of
ich habe
art.
keinen Eimer. Wo ist
What
Mr.
was it
Eimer?
about this room that, but eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
Warte mal, geradeaus war ich ja gewesen, war? Genau, das war der...
And so he detoured through the maintenance section, walked
Na,
straight
damit lass
ahead
mal
to the
runter, ja.
opposite
Ich gehe erst mal
door,
geradeaus.
and got back on track.
Ich jetzt da lang oder ich jetzt da lang? Ah ja.
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Warte mal, da war ich ja eigentlich auch schon überall, war. Gucken, was unten wieder ist.
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss. Admitting he had left his post during work hours, he might be fired for that. And in such a competitive
wieder
economy,
Unendlichkeitsding
why
hier,
had he
oder?
taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all.
Gut, also das hatten
None
wir
of it
schon mal.
made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For
Gibt's
example,
überhaupt ein Ende bei
why
dem
couldn't
Spiel?
he see his feet when he
Ich glaube, wenn
looked
das jetzt
down?
wirklich so unendlich
Why did
weitergeht,
doors close
dann
automatically
dann
behind
glaube
him
ich,
wherever
ist
he
das denn
went?
vielleicht der letzte
And for
Part.
that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself,
Gucken.
this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words for it. I'm dreaming, he yelled. This
Gut,
is
das hatte
all
ich
a
alles schon.
dream. Oh, what a relief Stanley felt to have finally found an answer, an explanation. His co-workers weren't actually gone. He wasn't going to lose his job. He wasn't crazy after all. And he thought to himself, I suppose I'll wake up soon. I'll have to go back to my
Ja, bleib
boring
hier.
real-life job pushing
Irgendwo
buttons.
stehen.
I may as well enjoy this while I'm still lucid.
Spiel erneut beginnen. Kann man da was einstellen hier? Warte mal. Darstellung, Untertitel, Audiosteuerung, okay. Ah, die Musik mal. Gut, ich werde jetzt zum Schluss die Musik ein bisschen runterdrehen, ist auch geil.
So, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground.
Okay, das war vorher noch
Then he
nicht.
imagined himself soaring through space on a magical starfield,
Oder?
and
Konnte ich
it
vorher auch
too
schon fliegen?
appeared. It was so much fun, and Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so
Ich
lucid?
bin
And then
Superman.
perhaps the strangest question of them all
Exit.
entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself
Ey,
sooner.
steht davor, ihr werdet in so ein
Why
endlos
is there
Ding
a
hier
voice in
gefangen.
my
In
head
dem Teil hier.
dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking?
Es
Now the voice
Ist
was
besser, wie es ins
describing
Toilette gehen
itself
würde.
being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly
Gut,
strange.
ich sag mal, hier gibt's eine
I'm
Tränkeautomat.
dreaming about a voice
Das, aber
describing
zu
me,
essen gibt's das hier auch nicht, wa?
thinking about how it's describing my thoughts, he thought.
Also muss ja richtig
And while he
langweilig sein,
thought it
wenn ihr
all
wirklich so eine
very odd
endlos
and wondered if this
Schleife hast
voice
und du
spoke
bist
to
da
all
drin
people
gefangen.
in their dreams, The truth
Da
was
drehst
that,
du
of
irgendwann
course,
vollkommen durch.
this was not
Ich
a
sag, du
dream.
Passierschein
How could it
38.
be? Was Stanley simply deceiving himself? Believing that if he's asleep, he doesn't have to take responsibility for himself? Stanley is as awake right now as he's ever been in his life. Now, hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley. After all, he knew for certain, beyond a doubt, that this was in fact a dream.
Und
Did the
guck
voice
mal,
not see him float and make the magical
kommt.
stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just... He would prove it. He would prove that he was in control, that this was a dream. So he closed his eyes gently, and he invited himself to wake up. He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin,
Aha.
the press of the
Gut,
mattress
jetzt haben
on
wir
his
schon
back,
mittlerweile.
the fresh air of a world outside this one. Let me wake up, he thought to himself. I'm through with this dream. I wish it to be over. Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please, it's all I want. I want my apartment, and my wife, and my job. All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been. My life is normal. I am normal. Everything will be fine. I am okay.
Okay.
Stanley began screaming. Please, someone, wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss. I have an office. I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real. I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I? And everything went black.
Gut, also merke, runtergehen, nicht nochmal. Das macht keinen Spaß.
This is the story of a woman named Mariella.
Ach, Marielle hatten wir auch schon.
Mariella woke up on a day like any
Ich
other.
glaube, dann
She
sind wir eigentlich
arose,
fast
got
soweit
dressed,
überall
gathered
durch
her
komplett, ne?
belongings, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking
Ja,
and
die Geschichte
screaming
kennen wir
to
auch schon.
himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk.
Paul, oder
And
wiederholst
although
dich?
she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments, she
Also,
considered the
rausgegangen?
strange
Du kannst ja nur
man.
eigentlich den Weg und
He was
dann fängst du
obviously
an mit links
crazy.
oder rechts.
This much she knew.
Links
Everyone
oben
knows
im
what
Büro
crazy
waren wir
people
auch
look
schon.
like. And in that moment, she
Eigentlich
thought to
kannst du,
herself
wenn
how
du
lucky
rechts
she
gehst, ja,
was
wo
to be
kommst du da
normal.
eigentlich? Da hast du auch nicht
I
viele
am
Möglichkeiten
sane.
eigentlich.
I am in control of my mind. I know what is real
Also
and
viel
what
kann man eigentlich auch
isn't.
nicht machen. Mal gucken,
It
vielleicht
was
mache ich noch einen
comforting to
Durchgang
think
und
this,
dann
and in a
denke ich
certain
mal,
way,
dann werde ich
seeing this
wahrscheinlich
man made
eher
her feel
aufhören.
better. But then she remembered the meeting she had scheduled for
Weil,
that day.
ja.
The very important people whose impressions of her would affect her career, and by extension, the rest of her life. She had no time for this, so it was only a moment that she stood there, staring down at the body. And then she turned and ran.
Oh. Entschuldigung, war gerade kurz AFK. Musste hier
All of
nur
his
mal...
co-workers were gone. What could it mean?
Ach, kurz
Stanley
noch
decided to go
erklären,
to
mein
the
Kater, der
meeting
hat schon wieder
room.
genervt.
Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
So. Ja, wie gesagt, jetzt glaube ich der letzte Durchgang hier, weil sonst... Ich habe ja soweit eigentlich jetzt alles, glaube ich, durch, oder? Ich weiß es ja nicht. Klar, gibt es natürlich noch ein paar Dinger. Aber ich wüsste jetzt echt nicht, wo ich sonst noch hingehen sollte. Was sei denn... Irgendwie eine Tür geht hier noch auf. Ah. So.
When Stanley came to a set of two open doors,
Ja, ich
he
nehme mal die
entered, but
rechte
this
wieder.
was not the correct way to the
Gucken wir da
meeting room,
ankommen.
and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps
Ja,
he
Stanley
wanted to
wusste
stop
das
by the
ganz genau.
employee lounge first, just to admire it. Standing now in this incredible room, Stanley for the first time, but eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his
So, da
left.
war ich ja schon mittlerweile eigentlich. Da ist ja auch nichts. Und unten war ich auch schon. Gehen wir hier einfach mal geradeaus weiter.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he
Vielleicht ist hier
wasn't
noch eine
5
andere
years ago.
Alternative. Gibt es hier noch irgendwie einen Weg? Nee, wa? Aber da kommst du nicht lang. Da ist auch eine Tür. Warte mal, wenn ich jetzt...
Look, Stanley, I think perhaps we've gotten off on... But in his eagerness to prove that he is in control of the story
Und
and
das
no one
ist
gets
auch
to
neu
tell him
gewesen.
what
Das
to
habe ich auch noch
do,
nie gehabt.
Stanley leapt from the platform and plunged to his death. Good job, Stanley.
Danke.
Everyone thinks you are very powerful. Stanley had never seen the office this brightly lit. Was it a sign of something? He hoped it was. He hoped very much that it was. Stanley lifted the bucket into his arms, and a wave of comfort rushed over him. Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
Ich habe einen Eimer. Mal gucken wir mal, was der Eimer mir jetzt sagt.
Still no one was here. Stanley needed the bucket's warmth and comfort now more than ever. Perhaps his boss's office was where he'd find answers.
Closet. Ah ja.
Coming to
unten war ich schon. Nee,
Stanley's,
danke.
Stanley
Nicht
and the
nochmal
bucket
den Mist.
walked upstairs to the boss's office.
Gucken, da steht hier jetzt was anderes. Nö, was? Ah doch. Cause the boss knows. Oh.
You found one of them. One of the
Einer.
miniature Stanley
hab's
figurines.
wieder.
Remember, no reward for collecting all of these, only the intrinsic pleasure of a job well done. You can't buy that sort of happiness, Stanley. God knows I've tried. So, I implore you to savor each and every moment you come across one of these beautiful figurines.
Oh. Nö, die sammeln jetzt nicht alle, die alle Figuren, was aber bekloppt bei. Okay, also jetzt steht da was anderes. So, ich habe einen Eimer. Der Arbeit ist immer noch nicht da. Nee, der Fahrstuhl verarscht mich, das lasse ich auch.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Crushed by the weight of this revelation, Stanley may have broken down into an emotional dumpster fire if not for the soothing presence of the bucket. Even now, in his darkest of hours, did the bucket's warmth and guiding light pierce the dark clouds of confusion and chaos. It would be with him always. The bucket would, and he knew it. The two of them were inseparable. At this point, Stanley was so absorbed in the tender spiritual connection he shared with the bucket that he didn't notice the keypad behind the boss's desk. Nor in his bliss of simply being near the bucket did he have any notion that the pin number for the keypad was 2845. But Stanley guessed the correct code by sheer luck.
Hatte ich doch recht.
Was it that the bucket knew all along? Was
Ich
the
war mir echt
bucket
nicht mehr sicher.
guiding
2,8 und dann hörte das
Yes,
auf.
this is certainly the most logical explanation.
So. Da jetzt auch nicht. Ach doch, da ist auch noch eine Figur. Ah,
Another
Mensch.
miniature Stanley
Nummer drei.
figurine. This, you know, there really must be a snappier name for these things. What about mini stands? Stanley figs? Or what about Stanlerines? Yes, I think I like that. Another Stanlerine under your belt.
Stanley Gur. Ah ja, du säufst auch irgendwas, oder? Gucken wir, wo ich hier noch was habe. Ach, Stanley Guren. Also 3 noch, okay. Gut, ob ich jetzt alle 3 finde, weiß ich jetzt nicht. Wer weiß, wo die sind überall.
The elevator
Oder du musst den
raced
richtigen
downward,
Weg gehen und dass die
plummeting
da irgendwo
towards an
versteckt sind.
unknown fate. It would be all Stanley could do to keep himself together,
Hey,
if
rein.
not for the bucket.
Ach,
Soothing him, comforting him, reassuring that in this darkest moment of uncertainty, he would be all right. The bucket is here
vielleicht
for
fliegen
you,
noch, was sind wieder
Stanley.
hier so komische
Everything
Figuren, wa?
will be fine.
Ja, sag ich doch.
Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through the large door that read,
die Stanley?
Mind Control
Nicht, dass da eine
Facility.
Stanley-Figur ist. Ja, macht das Licht mal noch dunkler. Mein Eimer. Ach doch, ihr habt den Eimer noch. Ich dachte, mein Eimer wäre weg.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What
Ja, haben wir
horrible
auch schon.
secret did this place hold?
Aber ich gucke
Stanley and
jetzt
the
einfach nur mal
bucket both wondered
Stanley-Figuren,
to
ob ich da vielleicht noch was
themselves.
finde. Irgendwie. Weil sonst, das andere hatte ich ja eigentlich alles schon. Da wüsste ich jetzt echt nicht, wo ich noch
The
hingehen.
monitors
Oder
jumped
ich
to
bin immer
life,
so
and
geschickt an
Stanley
irgendwas
nearly dropped the
vorbeigerannt.
bucket in shock. Everyone in the office was being videotaped, monitored like guinea pigs. The bucket had never seen anything like this, and it very nearly burst into tears as Stanley cradled it gently, reassuring it that everything would be fine.
So, gucken wir mal.
Was the bucket under the mind control facility's influence as well? Had the bucket been told to do things it didn't wish to do? What kinds of things does a bucket want to do or not want to do in the first place?
Was genau will ein
These
Eimer überhaupt
questions
tun?
raced furiously in Stanley's feeble
Ich glaube,
mind.
in Eimer bin ich jetzt hier aber noch nie lang gelaufen. Wa?
No! He screamed into the bucket. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control, never! He squeezed the bucket tighter. His one friend in the entire world. At this point, he could trust no one except for the bucket.
Er konnte niemand
But
außer
here
dem
was the
Eimer
proof.
vertrauen.
The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or
Entweder muss
content.
ich On drücken und das
Walking,
dann
eating,
irgendwie
working, all of it
hier noch eine
monitored
Figur
and commanded from this
rumschwirrt,
very
oder,
place. And as the cold reality of his past
oder
began
hier
to
ist ja
sink in,
keine.
Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he and the bucket would dismantle the controls for good. Two best friends, Stanley and the bucket, up against the world. They high-fived in a really cool way, and the bucket made a sassy comment about taking down the system.
So, was jetzt? Einmal was aus.
Stanley and the bucket waited in blackness. Was it over?
Stanley und der Eimer
Yes, they
in
had
die
done it.
Freiheit.
Stanley and the bucket had defeated their greatest and darkest enemy, freed themselves from the tyrannical grip of the evil mind control machine. Freedom was now mere moments away. Excitedly, the two of them began to discuss the kind of life they wanted to live once they stepped through this massive door. The bucket wanted to learn to roller skate. Stanley wanted to sneeze in every country on Earth. Both of them wanted to begin watching a movie, any movie, but then stop it halfway through and begin watching it in reverse from the end. True, it was a simple life they envisioned, but it was one they'd lived together, with one another to lean on, to trust, to support, and... What? Wait. What was happening? Why had the door stopped? Was Stanley and the bucket not about to be freed?
Jetzt ist was anderes. Jetzt hat es
An
aufgehört.
unbearable silence filled the room, lingering in uncertainty, until finally the truth hit Stanley square in the face. This building did not want the bucket to leave. Even the facility itself recognized the incredible calming presence of the bucket, needed the soothing warmth of the bucket, would go to any lengths not to part with the bucket. No, no, no. Stanley can't leave this place. Not while he has such a precious bucket in his arms. Not while this building has anything to say about it. Stanley realized he would never again leave this very room. But at least he has the bucket. To be trapped eternally in darkness isn't really so bad, Stanley thought to himself. As long as I have my bucket with me, right? I'll be okay, won't I? Stanley gulped. Very soon now, he was about to find out.
Okay. Das heißt, Stanley, da brauchst du Eimer nicht. Naja, warum auch nicht, wa? So, gut. Gut, ich glaube, gibt wahrscheinlich nichts großartig Neues mehr.
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Deswegen werde ich jetzt, glaube ich, einfach mal hier jetzt den Part bzw. das Spiel beenden. Weil, ja, es gibt da, glaube ich, so nichts Neues jetzt hier mehr zu entdecken. Ich glaube, ein richtiges Ende wird es hier wahrscheinlich auch nicht geben. Das ist wahrscheinlich so ein endlos Ding, dass du die ganze Zeit durchlaufen kannst. Lass mich einmal erstmal da. Ja, nee, dann beende ich das Ganze
When
hier
Stanley
und
came
sag
to a set of two
mal, vielen
open
Dank fürs
doors,
Zuschauen.
this was not the correct way to the
Und
meeting room, and
ja,
Stanley
wie
knew
gesagt,
it
ich habe noch ein
perfectly
paar
well. Perhaps he
Projekte,
wanted to
also
stop by the
die ich in
employee
der
lounge
Hinterhand habe.
first,
Also
just
Silent
to
Hill 2 werde
admire
ich auf
it.
jeden Fall spielen. Da werdet ihr wahrscheinlich dann auch
Stanley
mir den
felt
Quatsch mit
lightheaded,
anhören.
butterflies in his stomach,
ähm,
giddy in a
ja,
way
Until
he
Dawn
had
ist mir
never
echt noch
known
zu teuer für
before.
70 Euro, muss ich
Was
sagen.
it this
Also
room?
da
A
warte ich echt noch, bis
connection
es
between,
billiger
but
ist.
eager to get back to
Weil für
business,
Remastered
Stanley took the
ist mir das
first
echt,
open door on
nee,
his
muss
left.
nicht sein. Jo, ähm, ja, also ich habe noch eine, muss ich selber jetzt erstmal gucken. Äh, ja, also ich habe, ja, Alan Wake 2 kommt dabei diesen Monat raus, der DLC, das werde ich auf jeden Fall auch spielen. Dann das neue Life is Strange, Double Exposure oder wie das heißt, das werde ich auch noch spielen. Ja, wie gesagt, da kommen haufenweise noch andere Sachen raus. Also vielleicht noch Uncharted Legacy of Thieves, die Kollektion. Die interessiert mich auch mal. Und ja, dann gibt es noch, nächstes Jahr kommt noch GTA 6 und Ghost of Yotei und Kong Survivor Instinct. Also wie gesagt, da kommen noch haufenweise Spiele raus. Welche ich davon jetzt mit meinem hier Quatsche versehe, weiß ich jetzt ehrlich gesagt nicht. Weil wie gesagt, das kommt auch auf die Zeit drauf an. Weil ich habe jetzt kein direktes Gaming-Zimmer oder sowas, sondern ganz normal. Und deswegen schaffe ich also nicht jedes Spiel mit Kommentar zu versehen. Aber ich werde versuchen, so viel wie möglich immer mit Kommentar zu machen. Ja, dann sage ich vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. Dann lasst ein Like, Kommentar, ein Abo da. Und dann sehen wir uns beim nächsten Mal. Bis dann, ciao.